Hi, my name is Chris, N9CVR. In this video, we're going to talk about a couple of changes to FCC rules that are coming up that might want to make you get your license a little quicker. You may have heard in the past couple days that the FCC has decided to start charging a licensing fee if you take a test. That'll work out to about $35, and that starts on April 19th. So a few of you might be kind of going, but wait a second, I've always paid to get my license. Well, what's going on here? So actually, there's two sets of fees that are going on. And to understand that more, we're going to have to dig into the structure of how ham radio licensing works. We'll do that in a bit here. But basically, you have the volunteer examiners who have always charged a fee. Or at least around here, it's usually about $15. And then you have the Federal Communications Commission. And at least recently, FCC has not been charging for the licenses. So you are only paying a fee to basically the guys who are there giving you the test, just kind of a convenience fee. For the paper, the printouts, they're not really their time. That's supposed to be a volunteer thing, but any incidental charges. So let's hop over to the computer and dig a little more into what's going on here. All right, so what I want to really get across here is how the examination process works. And therefore, we're kind of going to be grabbing stuff from, frankly, all three of the exams and really trying to get an understanding of how the exam process works. So, first thing, we're kind of going to start with you. You want to take your test. Hopefully, you're going to study for it. There's several places where you can get practice exams. QRZ is a good one. hamstudy.org is a good one. But past that, I'm not really going to treat your knowing. I guess let me mention another thing. Another really good place to get essentially the knowledge to pass the test is also there's a couple of YouTube channels. Ham Radio 2.0 is a good example, who have put online test prep classes up. That's especially since COVID has happened. A lot of stuff kind of switched to online, and a couple of these channels have done a really, really good job of putting that stuff out there on YouTube. Past that, I'm not really going to deal with your knowledge of the material to take the test. That's kind of up to you. But here's kind of what process you're going to go through to get your license. So first thing, you have to have what is called an FRN. That's an FCC registration number. That's something you just go on the FCC website and fill out some information, and they give you an FRN. You need that in order to basically be able to talk to the FCC about anything, and that includes when later on you have passed your test, hopefully, and they've got to figure out what call sign to assign you. So you get your FRN. That's a free thing. You just do it. And then you're going to show up at the testing session. Usually that is in person. Again, recently since COVID, there have been a couple of, actually good amount of places that do it remotely. But still, I'd say the vast majority of them are in person. First thing you're going to do is they're going to give you a form to fill out, name, address, email. The FCC, since recently, communicates with you by email instead of by snail mail. They're going to ask you, if you're a convicted felon. There's certain types of crimes that you're not going to be able to get a ham radio license after having committed. Things like that. That's basically what the form is going to be, and then you submit that to the volunteer examiners, which we'll get to what they do in a second, along with fees, a fee. And now here's where this kind of is about to change in April, because this pay fees should probably also be here. It should stay here, but also over here, because you're going to pay that $35 license fee to the FCC probably about the same time you're making sure that your FRN is there and all of that. And then when you get to the testing session, you'll also pay a fee to the volunteer examiners. Once you got that and your fees are paid, then they're going to give you the test. The test is multiple choice, 4 choices per question. The exam pools are out there. That's something that gets covered. Basically, the volunteer exam coordinators, which we'll talk about them later, to go through that every 4 years or so, and make sure all the questions still make sense, so that we're not asking stuff that just completely has nothing to do with ham radio anymore. And those are something you can find. I already mentioned the practice tests on QRZ and Ham Study, and there's other places as well. They're basically pulling from those pools of questions. Each test has to have a certain amount of questions from each category of questions. And so you can kind of go into most of the tests, especially technician in general, knowing basically what you're going to do, which is kind of where this comes from with a lot of the exam classes, where they're teaching you, hey, look, here's the question, here's the correct answer. Because for technician in general, that's actually not that hard to do. For the extra test, the question pool is a lot bigger, and at least the way I feel about it, it's just going to be easier for you to understand it than to try to memorize all the answers. Anyway, so you take your test. Now, at the testing session, there have to be 3 or more individuals who are certified as volunteer examiners. That's VEs. And they're basically proctoring the test. When I took my technician in general together, oh gosh, there was probably 7 or 8 of them. Maybe even more, like 10 of them. There was a lot of them. 3 of them were in charge of actually grading the test, though. So that's where your 3 come from. So these volunteer examiners are basically going to make sure that everything's going according to plan, that you're not cheating, that you're not, and no shenanigans going on. The other thing they do, as I mentioned, they grade your test once you're done with it. If you pass, awesome. They're going to look at this stuff. If you fail the test, which a passing grade is 74%. I don't remember off the top of my head what that works out to for the technician in general tests. It's out of 37 questions, I believe. No, 35 questions. So I want to say maybe it's like 26 that you have to get correct, but 74%, whatever that is. For the extra test, I happen to know that it is 37 out of 50 that you have to get right. Because I'm studying for it right now. So if you get less than that 74%, they're going to give this form that you filled out back to you and basically tell you to have a nice day and come back, try again later some other day. Okay, you passed, let's say. Next thing they're going to look at is they're going to look back at this form and say, okay, are you that felon? Is there something on your form that basically shows that you're not going to be able to be qualified to have a ham radio license? Any of that stuff. If so, they're going to give you the form back, tell you have a nice day, try again later. If not, they're going to hopefully you have complied with all the requirements. That usually involves that fee, that involves making sure that you haven't cheated on the test, things like that. If you have, they're going to give this back to you, tell you to get out of there and try again later. Assuming that's okay, then they're going to send your form and test results to the volunteer exam coordinator. Now, what the volunteer exam coordinator is basically a group who have gotten together with the FCC and said, hey, look, we're going to take care of basically anything ham exam oriented. So the question pools, the getting the volunteer examiners together, things like that. There are 14 volunteer examiner coordinators in the United States. The two really famous ones are the Amateur Radio Relay League, or ARRL, and W5YI. That's a pretty common one, kind of southwest-ish, something like that. So your VEs are going to take your test and make sure everything's okay, and then send paperwork to the volunteer exam coordinator. That includes the form you filled out and then also your certificate of successful completion of the test. And they're going to send that to the VEC. The VEC is then going to basically tell the FCC, you're good to go. And then from there, the FCC will give you your call sign if you don't have one yet, give you your upgrade, whatever have you there. So that's kind of the general process of testing. Now what I want to do is run through basically a bunch of the test questions on all three of the exams. So first we're going to hop through the technician class exam. Notice this expires this year, so I suppose there's some chance that some of this may change in the future, but we're really not covering stuff here that is just on the cutting edge of how stuff goes. So I would be a little surprised if much of it changed in the future, but there it is. The test question pools are basically categorized into sections. T for technician, and then 1C is basically, section 1 is all the FCC stuff, and C is where the exam stuff is located. It's, I think, about 12, 13 questions, something like that in T1C. So you have T1C 01, 02, 03, etc., all the way up to, I think, 13. I don't remember exactly. Each section has a different amount of questions. So we're going to hop through the ones that make sense. So here we are, T1C01. For which license classes are new licenses currently available? You may have heard of novice license. You may have heard of advanced. There's extra. So there's a whole bunch of them in here that Technician Plus, I haven't heard of that one before, but that just means I haven't heard of it. But really the answer is the FCC is handing out licenses for technician, general, and amateur extra. I have still occasionally run into a novice, but that is something that the FCC used to hand out licenses for. Some people just never chose to upgrade to technician. So they're still out there, but that's not a license class that you can go out and get right now. All right, notice we've hopped through a bunch of questions here. They're just kind of not relevant to this discussion. So this is by no means like a test prep. Let's go through all the questions. It's more meant to give you an idea of, hey, this is the questions you're going to see on the test. It's not really truly meant as a exam study video. So what's the normal term for an FCC issued primary station or operator amateur radio license grant? So basically this is your ham radio license they're talking about. Technically, when you get your license, you get two licenses. One is for you as an operator, and then one is for what you're going to call your primary station. Obviously, if you have a Radio Shack and you have a base station that is wired in, that would probably make sense to be your primary station. But if all you got is a handy-talkie, that counts too. So how long does that license last, basically? And the correct answer is 10 years. So every 10 years you got to go back and renew. You might remember that from my last video. I waited 10 years plus the 2 years grace period plus 3 months, and because that was more than the 12 years total, I ended up having to take the technician and general again. Well, the technician again, and then I decided to do general. All right, how soon after passing the exam for your first amateur radio license may you operate an amateur radio? And the answer here is as soon as your operator station license grant appears in the license database. They'll email you within a few hours of that happening. The big thing to keep in mind here is this is your first amateur radio license. So technically, like if you're in the situation I was in where your license had lapsed and you're out of your grace period, you're going back to getting your first license. And you cannot operate immediately just because you passed the test. The FCC does not mail this stuff to you. You don't wait 30 days. You're just waiting for it to show up in the database. And like I said, they'll email you when that happens. All right, on to the general class exam. Notice this one expires in 2023. They kind of do this rotating thing to make it a little easier on themselves, so they're not trying to maintain 3 tests in 1 year. Okay, what license exams may you administer if you are an accredited volunteer examiner, holding a general class operator license? So the general rule, pardon the pun there, is you can do whoever is under you. Now that gets a little weird with the extra license because there's nobody above extra, so how do you get your extra test? Well, other extras have to give that test. But that basically means a general operator can get accredited only to administer technician exams. That being said, a lot of places, like for example my amateur radio club, they basically say, look, if you're a general, we don't want to hear from you. It's just too much paperwork. It's easier to only allow the extras to be VEs because, hey, they can administer all of them. However, like I said, that's not the law. That is just how a lot of clubs tend to do it. On which of the following band segments may you operate if you are a technician class operator and you have a certificate of successful completion of examination, or CSCE, for general class privileges? So basically this means you're a technician and you passed your general test. However, that's not written anywhere in the FCC yet. It's kind of still in the pipe. And the correct answer is you can actually hop on HF if you want and start using it immediately. Now the big thing here is the minute you are doing anything that would require general class privileges, you want to say that on air. And basically what that looks like is, so for example, if I was a technician, and I had my CSCE for the general class, but it wasn't in the database yet. Let's say I'd hop on 40 meters or whatever and call out CQ, and I would say N9CVR slant AG. Slant as in the slash on the keyboard, right below the question mark. And basically what that means is N9CVR is me, and I am acting as general. Really the only way to do that is if you have passed your general exam. So that basically tells anybody who may be listening, and there actually are people who do this, listen and make sure that you are operating within your privileges. And it tells them that yes, you are, because you passed your test. It's just not in the database yet. All right, which of the following is a requirement for administering a technician class license examination? Well, you have to be one higher, so it would have to be a general. And then we talked about there have to be at least 3 of them. So I put the arrow in the wrong place. Sorry about that. It should be this last one. At least 3 general class or higher VEs must observe. The reason why this one's wrong is because technician class. So ignore the arrow, please. Sorry about that. Which of the following must a person have before they can become an administering VE for a technician class license exam? Well, again, you got to have your general, and you have to be accredited by the VEC. Again, which VEC? There's 14 of them. That depends on basically what area you are, geographical area you're in. Around here, it's pretty much strictly the ARRL. Down south, it's often W5YI, and there's 12 other of them as well, depending on the location. You can actually get certified by multiple, so I've heard of a couple of people being certified through ARRL and W5YI. That basically just means that you can give tests to more people. And really the reason for the certification, or sorry, accreditation through the different VECs is that every VEC has different criteria for you getting their accreditation. They're all given the same tests, but they just kind of, I guess, each organization feels a little differently about what it takes to administer an exam. Volunteer examiners are accredited by what organization? We just talked about this. It's a volunteer examiner coordinator. There's 14 of them, so you can kind of take your pick, but you know, at least around Wisconsin, if you get accredited by W5YI as an example, that's, you basically just wasted your time. So you kind of want to pick the one or ones that are going to be useful to you in your area. Which of the following criteria must be met for a non-U.S. citizen to be an accredited volunteer examiner? Actually, all you need to do is have a general license through the FCC. None of the other stuff matters. You don't have to have been a resident for a while. You can actually become a VE, and ITU Region 2, that's kind of the chunk of the world that we fall into. That doesn't have anything to do with it either. What is the minimum age that one must be to qualify as an accredited volunteer examiner? You got to be grown up. You got to be 18. So that is a little different for getting your license. If you want to get your ham radio license, there is no age limit. There are a couple of kids out there, 9, 10, 11 years old who have gotten their ham radio licenses, and that's totally fine. Totally cool. All right, that's the general questions. Let's hop on to the extra questions. And Let me make a comment here really quick, even if you're not planning on taking the extra test. I personally really don't understand why these tests or these particular questions are divided into the 3 tests, because to my mind, this is something that every radio amateur should know. And that's kind of why I'm going through this stuff. Certain things when you get into the different tests, for your technician tests, maybe you don't need to be able to calculate bandwidth or things like that. Maybe and that's stuff that tends to be in the extra class exam. But to me, how the testing works and basically what's going to happen here, I would have thought that would be important to everybody. But I'm not a VE, and I'm definitely not a VEC, so that's just personal opinion. All right, for which types of out-of-pocket expenses do the Part 97 rules state that VEs and VECs may be reimbursed? This is just kind of a general interest question. Basically, anything having to do with preparing, processing, administrating, and coordinating the test. So down here there's teaching a prep course, that doesn't count. Providing prep training materials, that doesn't count. It's literally just the stuff around the test itself. All right, who does Part 97 task with maintaining the pools of questions? This is kind of a how amateur radio works thing. Basically, what's worked really well for the past 100 years or so is the FCC has pretty much let us do whatever we want as long as it doesn't cause problems, and we have kind of worked together to make sure that it doesn't cause problems, I guess. So the FCC doesn't really care. The ARRL, that is a volunteer examiner coordinator, fine, okay. The answer is all of the VECs together get together and decide what are the questions going to be for the question pools. So all 14 of them basically send representatives to a committee that decides this. And again, the amateurs kind of do it themselves. So getting each and every volunteer examiner involved, that would be way too much nightmare. The VECs take care of that. Which of the following best describes the volunteer examiner accreditation process? Now, this is a bit of an awkward question because the correct answer, let's read it and then I'll explain it. The procedure by which a VEC confirms that the VE applicant meets FCC requirements to serve as an examiner. When I say that, I kind of feel like I just made a bunch of word salad, just like, yes, those were all words, good for you. But really, the reason this question is like this is because we kind of covered this a little bit before. There's 14 VECs, and each VEC accredits volunteer examiners differently. So really, this is about as specific of an answer as we can give you, which is just, what is the accreditation process? Well, it's however each VEC decides to accredit volunteer examiners, and that changes. So, what is a volunteer examiner coordinator? Hopefully by now you can kind of figure that out. Give you a second to read the answers and see what you think. It's an organization that has entered into an agreement with the FCC to basically do amateur license exam stuff. So here you see a lot of a person who, it's not an individual person, it's an organization. Now, I will throw this out. That can be a little confusing sometimes because you look at, for example, W5YI. W5YI is the call sign that goes to Gordon West, who is a big ham radio guy. So that kind of makes you think, okay, well, it's just an individual person. And actually what's going on is Gordon West has basically created an organization with the name of his call sign, which does VEC duties. So it's not just Gordon doing that, it's a whole bunch of people. ARRL is a little more obvious. That's obviously an organization. But yeah, it always has to be a group of people. It's kind of too big a job for any one person to do. Super important thing, I don't understand why this one is not on the technician test, but okay. What is the minimum passing score on all amateur operator license examinations? And the correct answer is 74%. On the extra test, that works out to 37 out of 50 points. I believe, my math isn't good, but I want to say it's like 26 out of 35, something like that on the technician and general tests. But double check my math on that. Whatever 74% works out to. Who is responsible for proper conduct and necessary supervision during an amateur operator license exam session? Remember what we were talking about here with the amateurs kind of self-policing. The FCC doesn't want to hear about problems at an individual exam session. The VEC coordinating doesn't want to hear about problems during an individual exam session. You could argue maybe the VE session manager, I don't know, but really what it comes down to is every volunteer examiner who is in the room is responsible to make sure that that test session goes well. So really the reason for that is to avoid the, you find somebody cheating and, yeah, well, the other guys didn't say anything about it, so I thought it'd be okay. No, you see somebody cheating as a VE, it is your job to stop that test. So, given that, what should a VE do if a candidate fails to comply with instructions during an amateur operator license exam? Do you just stop the test? Do you warn the candidate? Do you shut down the entire session? Or do you let them finish the test but invalidate the results? And the answer is you just stop the test, the one candidate's test. Read that being when you go to take your test, it's pretty important that you do what they tell you to do. If they tell you don't bring in a graphing calculator with a whole bunch of memory in it, don't do it. If they tell you don't pull out your phone, don't do it. Otherwise, they're basically going to hand you back your form and say, have a nice day, come back next time when you can follow directions. To which of the following examinees may a VE not administer a test? Friends, relatives, employees, or all of them? Notice all of them is kind of in the middle here. This is a pretty common thing. The tests will have the 4 multiple choice answers, but there is no guarantee to what order they are in. So the correct answer is relatives. You can give it to your employees, you can give a test to your friends, just not certain relatives. All right, what's the penalty for a VE who fraudulently administers or certifies an examination? Again, remember this is amateur radio. You could maybe argue that there should be a fine or something, but prison sentence is definitely kind of much. Really, the answer is you get your license taken away. And then not just taken away, but you're not going to be able to come back next month and test for it again. You're going to have to wait a few years. What must the administering VEs do after administration of a successful examination? So basically, you passed. What do the VEs do? Again, kind of using that self-policing thing. They're not going to submit anything to the FCC. In fact, this is kind of weird, sending documents to the FCC according to instructions. What instructions? It's a very vague answer, and it's not a correct answer. Collecting and sending stuff for grading, well, the grading can be done on site, so that kind of invalidates these first two. So really the answer is all the VEs are going to do is collect your document, the form you filled out, and send that to the VEC that they work with, according to however the VEC wants them to do it. Okay, what must the VE team do if the examinee scores a passing grade? So again, it's not their job to give the license. That's the FCC who does that. You're not going to photocopy all of this and send it to the FCC for processing. The FCC doesn't want to have to deal with that. Therefore, all these choices are correct is not correct. So that just leaves you with 3 VEs. That's why you have to have 3 of them. Must certify that the examinee is qualified, so that you're not a felon or something, and that you've complied with all the requirements. What must the VE team do with the application form if you do not pass the test? Again, the FCC has way too much to do. They want to minimize their paperwork, so it's not that. Same with the VEC. It's not really your application form to destroy. So really all they're going to do is give you that application form to write back to you and say, have a nice day, try again later. So hopefully that rundown of the rules around taking a ham radio test is helpful for you. Again, with that extra fee coming up, I highly recommend for you to take your test, even if it's just the technician test. It's a really cool thing to get into. There's a lot there. You got about a month to study up for it, which seems like not much time, but you know, if you take a whole bunch of practice tests and especially watch some of those classes on YouTube, there's plenty of time to get it done. At least in my area, it's $15, and for the next 10 years, you'll be able to push this button, which is something that a lot of people are not able to do. And at least my experience has been, ever since I have gotten the license, it has just opened up a world. I was watching a video with Josh Nass in it the other day, and he was talking to a couple of guys about ham radio, and they made a comment about how it feels like they're just standing on the edge of the cliff looking down and seeing the vast abyss of things that you can get into. So hopefully this has kind of spurred you to go, hey, let me do this, save myself $35. And I'd love to hear from you. If you got any questions, hit me up in the comments. Found this helpful, give the video a like, and if you want to see more, hit the subscribe button. Other than that, I'll see you on the next video, and 73.